Hey, Joey, really good to have you here on the YouTube channel to talk about how you've built sales-driven agency.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So just to go ahead and jump right into things, can you tell me a bit about yourself and the business you built?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Joey Gilkey, CEO of Sales Driven Agency. I'm a hand in quite a few different projects and companies, but my main company is Sales Driven Agency. So what we do is we build out sales departments, sales teams, sales operations, mostly for digital marketing agencies specifically. So build their sales processes, hire their salespeople, train them, build their technology, all the fun stuff.
And how long ago did you start this?
I have been in the sales for digital agency space for about 6 years, but Sales Driven Agency started after an exit of my last company, and that was a little over. I guess we're now into our third year, barely. So we just crossed over the 2-year anniversary about a month ago.
So the last company that you exited, was that your first agency, or did you have agencies before that as well?
Agency before that. So I've been in the agency space as an entrepreneur for about 6. But prior to that, I was the VP of sales of a HubSpot digital marketing agency, and built sales team. That's kind of how I got into the whole sales building process, hiring, all that type of things for agencies. And then when I left that agency, I started my own. That one merged with another company. That company's called Flight Seed, and then started Tribe, which was my last. Essentially, we were an outbound sales agency at the time, very similar to what you guys do, but maybe a little bit more upstream with some higher ticket companies. And exited that to a software company, and then started Sales Driven Agency after I got bored counting my money, for lack of better terms.
Fair enough. Well, with the first agency you started, what was the service there?
Yeah, so we were building essentially sales funnels for software companies. So back when I started, growth hacker was kind of a new term. And so doing growth hacking, figuring out how to hack social platforms, how to hack different traffic sources was really big back then, because it was kind of new, right? This term growth hacker started back in like 2015, 16. And so for lack of better terms, we're kind of a growth hacker agency for software companies. And so what I learned, and the reason I ended up merging with another company and letting them take over was, I enjoyed the sales aspect of running the agency. So I enjoyed going and landing Cirrus Insight, which is a massive Salesforce tool. I did not enjoy the work that went into servicing what I just sold. And at the time, I didn't have a big enough team to really take a lot of things off my plate. So I just liked the sales side. So when I ended up passing Flight Seat off, I ended up starting Tribe, which was like, hey, I just want to do sales for agencies. And so that's how we ended up getting where we got to. And yeah, man, it was an interesting journey. I learned a lot about myself in the past 6 years.
That's awesome. I can resonate. I mean, I always enjoyed getting to meetings, not anything past that. And what do we do for our clients? We help them get up to the meeting. So I definitely can relate to you there. One question I love to ask is, obviously you're on agency number 3 right now. What were you first doing, those first clients, not for sales driven, but for your first agency? What was the way you got the first 3 to 5 in the door?
Just hardcore outbound. So it was, at the time, I've never been afraid of the phones. So my career started in basically a phone cubicle at the corporate Fortune level. I built a massive 115 person sales team prior to me moving into the small business world. That's kind of where I got my sales ops experience from, but I learned how to grind at that time. And so I learned how to pick up the phone. I made 100 dials a day. Now, when I started my agency, I learned, there's different ways to do this that are more scalable, less get your teeth kicked in. And so, I picked up the phone, and I was never afraid to do that. But honestly, cold email and social selling, I crushed LinkedIn when it first came out. There's a lot of automation tools now. Back then, there's like one, and no one was using it. And so LinkedIn at the time crushed for me. And so that's how I got into the opportunities. And then I'm obviously very good at like sales process. So once I got the meeting, it was, how do I work them from cold prospect to closed client? But if I recall, I think my first deal came from cold email when I started that agency.
I like to hear that.
Right?
Obviously, cold email is great. I mean, it's amazing. Even outside of running a business, just getting a job or meeting someone, I'm consistently shocked how, if I really want to get in touch with someone, I can't think of anybody I couldn't really get in touch with. a well-written, like handwritten cold email. Like if I wanted a job, that's kind of my backup. If I ever need a job, I know that with cold email, I can get myself 10 interviews in a week if I do it well. It's a great tool for everybody.
Easily.
And leading off that question, how you first got your clients, what does client acquisition look like for you right now?
So we're pretty holistic. I got a pretty robust sales team. I mean, obviously we're starting to work with you guys as like a secondary or probably more like a tertiary channel, but I've got a full SDR team. So they're making 100 dials a day, sending about 50 emails a day, doing about 25 social touch points a day. And so we're in the process of hiring a fourth SDR. I have an SDR manager who manages all of them. And then we have closers or account executives who those SDRs do meetings for. But our primary channels are cold call and cold email. And then now we're bringing, and then we have some inbound and stuff like that that's coming in through ads and our YouTube channel and my podcast that's gotten pretty popular in the agency space. But I'd say primarily 70% of our business is cold call and cold email, just going after who we want to work with.
I like to hear that. And you mentioned you have closers and SDRs. One question I like to ask, especially bigger agencies, so I think a lot of the information of the agency space is mainly people who have small, very small to mid-sized agencies. It becomes a huge bottleneck to recruit A players. So that's one of the things I've learned, how hard it can be to find those people who are going to go above and beyond. And I have a couple right now I'm really grateful for, but it's always a struggle of where do I find the next one? So having this big team and experience, what have you found to be the main keys to find these people and actually get them interested in your company?
Oh man, I made a big mistake running Tribe. And the mistake was just because someone can sit in a seat does not mean they're the best person for that seat. And so I was looking for, how can I cut corners? How can I find someone for cheaper? How can I thought I was saving money when in all actuality, I was spending way more money indirectly by hiring the wrong talent. And so, where do you find them? That's a challenge. I mean, I'm a big fan of recruiting, because I don't like, no, not always this way, but I don't love job boards. Usually people who are on job boards are people who are unhappy, not employed, not very good at what they do. And so you have to sift through 500 to get a solid 10. So I love recruiting. I love going after. I mean, let's take cold email for an example. Like you could take the elements and the principles and frameworks of cold email or social selling on LinkedIn or whatever, and go after top talent that is currently employed, currently working, currently producing wherever they're at. And you can, just like in cold email, trying to get a first-time appointment with a prospect, get a first-time appointment or a first interview with a potential solid person. So I think being willing to do some cold outreach to get the right talent is super important. Now, once you get the talent, how I have been able to surface and identify the top, I would call top 1%, is one, you got to have an incredible vetting process. And so we have a very streamlined 6-step process that we work candidates through to kind of ensure that they're a good fit in a lot of different ways and they're actually really good at their job. And the last element is you got to pay. You got to pay. Sure. My lowest paid employee makes $70,000 base salary.
Yeah, that's definitely high. I mean, that's also great to have that leverage, from starting more agencies over and over again, because you get to start with that immediately. I mean, I think I've made the same mistake that you mentioned, where you try to think, okay, well, what virtual assistant can do this? When in reality, that it should be an American or a Brit or an Australian or European doing that work. So that's one of the things I'm starting to learn. When you get to a certain part, your margins are going to decrease because you need the people who they're going to need to be paid more. So
great point. You'll notice that the more you scale into the multiple millions, you'll start noticing your margin is taking a hit. Because what happens is you start spending money on non-revenue generating people, right? So a lot of our money can be spent on revenue generation early on. And like we have to wear a couple hats, and technically we could just not pay ourselves, and therefore our margin looks good. But the moment you start building out a team, I got a fairly large team in one of my companies, let alone multiple. And you're paying your lowest paid one $70,000, it gets pretty expensive pretty quickly, and not all of them impact revenue. Yeah,
that definitely makes sense. And one question I want to transition this to is, obviously you guys got sales down, you're getting a lot of clients in the door. What are you doing to keep client retention high? How are you making sure that clients are rebuild and stick around?
Yep. Yeah. So what's funny, man, is Tribe was similar to yours, right? It's a retainer based company, and so the goal is retention. I actually built sales driven agency. So people hate running project companies because you always have to go find the next project. But when you're really freaking good at sales and you have sales process and sales people, projects can be just as predictable as MRR retainers, right? And so sales driven agency actually does not have a retention model at all. Our goal is to actually graduate our clients. Our goal is to graduate them as fast as possible. So the longer they stick around is actually a negative thing for my profit margin. So because we're project based, we charge about on average 85,000 per client. And they usually pay us in about 3 months. And so however long they stick around after 3 months is eating into my margin. And so my goal is actually to deliver such a high quality product at such a high speed that I can preserve a lot more of my margin. And so my goal is actually graduation, not retention. Now, that said, I still want them to come back, because we do have a sales recruiting company in-house. I do want them to come back and continually want to scale their sales team by using us for recruiting. But that said, I'll answer your question because I work with a ton of agencies, how I would answer the question about retention. Do never assume that your client knows the work you've done for them. Never make the assumption that they are very clear on how much you've served their company. A lot of times it's what have you done for me lately? And sometimes what you have done for them lately is not up to par of what you've done for them in the past. And so you need to be able to tell that story of here's where you were, here's where we've taken you, here's where we're going. And always communicating that story to them, probably over communicating that story to them so that they never forget, why are we paying this company? Because if times ever get hard, or they're looking at other investment opportunities and they see, when I was running Tribe, our average retainer was $15,000 a month. Well, when they see $180,000 line item and things are getting hard all of a sudden, or it's December and it's slow, you're usually at the top of the list of the chopping block. And so you want to be able to over communicate your value to a client. And if you could do that, retention will skyrocket.
I really like that answer. And that's one thing we're actually working on internally. Because we have noticed that our clients don't always know how much we are doing. So we're trying to set up automations to just little notifications when we start a lead list, finish a lead list, launch a campaign. We're also setting up recurring touch bases with clients on a monthly, on a phone and weekly message. So it's funny you mentioned that. That's one of the things that we're really working on, and it does make a lot of sense. I like how you mentioned kind of reselling them on the vision of where we are and where we're going. I think that's a really key factor as well.
It's important, man, because some people don't remember where they came from, and they just get so in the weeds of where they're at right now. They can't look backwards and they can't look forwards. And so backwards shows them where they've come from. Forward shows them where we still have to go. And it's like, hey, it's worth staying on the train because we're going there. But if you don't communicate that to them, they're gonna lose sight of one of those two things.
Sure. Well, last two questions for you. One of them is, what is the goal right now with Sales Driven? Is it to build it into a massive company and retain it for generations? Is it an exit like your previous companies? Do you want to turn it into the 4-hour work week? What is the goal?
Yeah, I mean, for me, man, I'm addicted to the game, right? I don't have to work anymore, and that's not really a brag as much as I've put a lot of work in. Financially speaking, I could never work. I could not work another day of my life and I'd be fine. But I wouldn't be fine because I'm addicted to building and creating and it is my hobby to build businesses. It is my hobby to solve problems with business. And so what I'm looking to do continually is leverage my skill set and my assets being my companies, to solve bigger problems or more and more problems. And so right now my focus is sales-driven agency is very niche. So it's focused on the agency space. We probably have another 10 million in revenue per year before we hit our, what I would say, the outskirts of our total addressable market. At that point, I will have a decision, either exit or start a licensing model where I start taking sales-driven agency to IT managed service providers or high ticket professional service companies or whatever it might be, something that's fairly transferable from or interchangeable with agencies. And then the other thing is, because I have such a great team, such a great skill set, such a great track record, right now it's acquiring entire companies or pieces of companies to bring into a portfolio that I can elevate all those companies. There's plenty of 6-figure companies out there that I could make them into 7-figure companies in 6 months, simply because I'm further along and I have the team that can do it. And I can do it at cost or very cheap. And so for me, it's looking for those opportunities to find the right operators who want to operate in their company, but they want to take a lot of things off their plate and or take shortcuts because we've already been there and done that. So that's kind of my next couple of years. There's potentially an exit down the road. I think sales driven agency could legitimately exit for 50 to 75 million in the next couple of years. But I think I'll have to make some big decisions between now and then.
Well, awesome. This has been really interesting. A lot of people I talk to, they're doing around $1 million or under $1 million. So there's not too many agencies that are doing these type of interviews are easy to find. It seems like whenever you search on YouTube, you find a lot of information to get to 10K, to 20K, maybe to 30K.
Yep.
But there's just fewer and fewer people who are even available to talk or make content or provide advice above that point. And normally they're too busy to do so anyway. So I think this interview was a gem. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
Last thing here is where can people go to learn about you? A link, Sales Driven Agency, down in the comments. But is there anywhere else people should look?
Yeah. So if you guys are all agencies or most of you are agencies listening to this, I would go check out the Best Damn Agency podcast. Honestly, you can probably check us on YouTube. So go to Joey Gilkey, type in Joey Gilkey's Sales Driven Agency in the bar, and it'll probably take you to our YouTube channel. I think I have a redirect somewhere. I just don't remember what the URL was.
Well, I'll get it linked.
All right, cool.
All right. Thanks so much, Joey.
All right, Michael. See you, buddy.